She entered the dealership slowly, pushing the glass door with gentle hands. Her clothes were simple, a plain dress and an old sweater, and her shoes were soft and worn from years of walking rather than riding in luxury cars. She carried a small purse, not a shiny designer bag, and her hair was tied back in a loose way that showed she did not spend hours getting ready. She looked like someone who came to ask for directions, not someone planning to buy a car, yet she was there with a real purpose, a loving purpose. She wanted to surprise her husband with a gift, a car he had admired for years. The thought made her smile softly, and for a moment she felt excited, but that feeling began to fade the moment she looked around the dealership. The room was full of polished cars with bright lights shining off their surfaces like mirrors. The scent of new leather and glossy wax filled the air. Salespeople stood tall in sharp suits, watches sparkling, voices smooth. They looked busy, confident, and proud. She stood there waiting for someone to greet her, but no one did. One salesman saw her but quickly looked away as if she did not belong. Another walked past her, pretending not to notice. She stayed patient, thinking maybe they simply had not seen her. She moved a little closer to a shiny black car and touched the edge of the mirror gently, imagining her husband smiling when he saw it. But then she heard a small laugh behind her. Two salesmen were whispering to each other while looking in her direction. One raised an eyebrow as if questioning why she was even there. The other smirked and shook his head. She pretended not to notice, but inside she felt a small sting. She told herself to stay calm. She knew who she was and she knew why she was there. She walked to a desk and cleared her throat softly, hoping someone would come. A young salesman looked up, sighed in annoyance, and then walked away to greet another customer who had just walked in wearing expensive clothes and a gold watch. She watched as he bowed his head politely and offered him coffee, while she stood there unseen. She tried again, stepping toward another staff member and asking gently if someone could assist her. The man barely glanced at her and said someone would be with her soon, but his tone showed he did not mean it. Minutes passed, long and uncomfortable. She could feel eyes on her, judging her, measuring her, deciding she was not worth time or effort. Still, she held her small purse close and stood straight. She believed that kindness and patience always worked. She believed people would see her heart, not her outfit. But this place was different. Here, appearance spoke louder than words. A fancy couple entered, laughing loudly, wearing bright jewelry and expensive perfume. Immediately 3 staff members rushed toward them, offering smiles, brochures, and sweet voices. She stepped aside so they could pass, and no one thanked her. She felt like a shadow in a room filled with bright lights. She began to feel something heavy in her chest, a mix of embarrassment and disappointment. She wondered why they could not see her as a customer. A woman with money, a woman with intention, a woman with purpose. She wondered why her simple look erased her value in their eyes. She reminded herself that she was not poor, she was not weak, she was not less. She simply did not show her wealth on the surface. She walked slowly toward the door, thinking maybe she should leave, but then she stopped. Her husband always told her to stand tall, to never let others define her worth. She took a quiet breath and turned back to look at the cars again. She imagined her husband smiling, his eyes lighting up. She imagined the joy of giving. She imagined the moment of surprise. She wanted that moment, and she did not want the rude behavior of strangers to take it away from her. So she stayed, even though her cheeks felt warm and her eyes felt tight. She approached another car and examined the interior through the window, trying to stay focused. But then she heard a voice behind her. It was one of the salesmen, and his tone was sharp and dismissive. He asked her if she was lost, or if she knew how expensive the cars were. He spoke loudly enough for others to hear. She felt the humiliation rise higher, but she answered politely, saying she wanted information about purchasing. The salesman chuckled and told her these cars were not for everyone, especially people who looked like they couldn't afford a bicycle. A few people nearby heard and looked away awkwardly. The woman felt a deep ache inside, not because she cared about his words, but because people like him existed. She stood there, silent but strong. She did not shout, she did not argue, she did not lower herself. Instead she reached for her phone and sent a quiet message to her husband, telling him where she was and what had happened. Her hands shook a little, not from fear, but from contained emotion. She put her phone away and waited, not because she needed rescue, but because she deserved respect. And soon, the dealership would learn exactly who they had ignored, exactly who they had judged, exactly who they had dismissed. And everything was about to change. The woman stood quietly in the middle of the dealership, trying to stay calm while the humiliation from moments earlier still echoed inside her. She looked around once more, hoping that maybe someone would finally treat her like a real customer, but instead she saw the same whispering, the same judging eyes, and the same careless attitudes. The salespeople continued to ignore her, acting as if she was invisible. Even though she was standing in plain sight, she reminded herself to breathe, to stay composed, because she knew losing her temper would only give them more reason to look down on her. Yet inside, the sting was sharp and real. A new salesman walked by, holding a tablet and smiling confidently. She lifted her hand slightly, trying to get his attention. But he brushed past her as if she was part of the furniture. Seconds later, she heard him speak with excitement to another customer who walked in wearing shiny shoes and a designer coat. The woman watched as they rolled out a red carpet treatment for him. Even though he had just stepped through the door, she could not understand how simple fabric, simple shoes, and a simple hairstyle could erase her worth so quickly in their eyes. She wondered how many others had felt this same silent mistreatment. Nearby, an elderly couple noticed the situation and exchanged concerned glances. The old woman leaned toward her husband and whispered that the simple woman looked kind and respectful and did not deserve that treatment. But they stayed quiet, unsure whether to interfere or stay out of it. The simple woman appreciated the sympathy, even though no words were spoken. She felt it, and it gave her a tiny spark of comfort. But the dealership staff still showed no interest in helping her, and the discomfort grew heavier with each passing moment. Then something different happened. A young trainee employee no older than 19 approached her slowly. He looked nervous, unsure, and hesitant, as if he had been told not to waste time on customers who did not look valuable. Still, he asked her softly if she needed assistance. His voice was gentle, respectful, and sincere. The woman nodded gratefully and explained that she wanted information about a specific model. The trainee listened carefully and began tapping on his tablet to retrieve the details, but before he could continue, the manager stepped in, his expression firm and disapproving. The manager placed a hand on the trainee's shoulder and told him loudly that he should focus on serious clients. The trainee looked uncomfortable and tried to explain that she needed help, but the manager shook his head and told him to attend to a different customer instead. The woman felt her heart sink again. This time it hurt even more, not because of the insult, but because kindness was being suppressed by authority. The trainee apologized quietly before walking away, his eyes full of guilt. The woman stood still, feeling her patience stretch thin like fragile glass. The manager turned to her and spoke with a fake smile. He told her that the cars in the dealership were high-end luxury vehicles and suggested she visit a cheaper place that suited her type better. His tone was coated in arrogance, every word dipped in judgment. The woman felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from quiet strength building within her. She looked directly into the manager's eyes, and for the first time he seemed startled, as if he expected her to shrink, but instead she stood firm and calm. Her silence was stronger than shouting, stronger than arguments, stronger than anything he expected. Around them, a few customers noticed the interaction and began watching. Some shook their heads at the manager's rudeness, some whispered in disbelief. A mother with a small child pulled her daughter closer and told her softly that you should never judge someone by how they look. The lesson floated through the air, unseen but powerful. The woman held on to those words without even hearing them, because she believed the same her whole life. She took out her phone again and checked the screen. There was a message from her husband saying he was almost there, and to stay where she was, she put the phone away and waited. But this time she did not feel small, she did not feel ashamed, she felt steady, like a calm wave before a storm. The dealership still didn't know who she was. They still didn't know the truth about her life, her status, or her strength. They still didn't know what was coming. And soon, very soon, the moment would arrive when every assumption they made would shatter like glass under pressure. The manager walked away confidently after dismissing her, believing he had handled the situation perfectly. He did not look back at her, certain she would leave soon. The woman stayed where she was, standing beside the glossy car that had first caught her attention. She traced her fingers lightly along the smooth paint, imagining how her husband would smile when he saw it sitting in their driveway. That thought kept her steady, even while the sting of disrespect still lingered like a cold draft. In her chest, she refused to let strangers ruin the surprise she had planned with love. It was that love that kept her standing tall instead of walking out the door. Across the showroom, the trainee who had tried to help her glanced in her direction several times. His eyebrows were drawn with worry, as though he wished he could go against the manager's orders. He watched as other employees continued laughing, joking, and talking loudly, never once looking at the woman who waited silently with dignity. The trainee felt something tighten inside him, because he had been raised to treat everyone with respect. He wondered how long he could work in a place that punished kindness and rewarded arrogance. He wished he had the courage to walk back to her, but fear held him still. Meanwhile, the same salesman who had mocked her earlier approached the group of staff and pointed at her subtly. They chuckled and shared assumptions about her, saying she might be lost, confused, or simply pretending to be rich. One of them claimed she probably came inside to enjoy the air conditioning. Another said she must have wandered in by mistake. Their voices carried far enough that she heard fragments of their insults. Though she pretended not to, each word was like a pebble tossed at Her, small but repeatedly hitting the same spot. Yet she did not break. She had learned long ago that silence can be stronger than shouting, and grace can be louder than pride. A woman customer nearby overheard the staff mocking and frowned deeply. She approached the simple woman quietly and asked if she was all right. Her voice was gentle and filled with genuine concern. The simple woman nodded and thanked her softly, saying she was fine. The friendly woman shook her head and said she didn't deserve such treatment. She offered to call a salesperson for her, but the simple woman politely declined, explaining that someone important was on the way. The friendly woman smiled with curiosity and wished her luck before walking away. Her kindness warmed the air for a brief moment, like sunlight passing through a cloud. The minutes stretched slowly, filled with whispers, glances, and judgmental smirks. The simple woman kept her eyes on the door, waiting for her husband, trusting that his presence would shift the energy in the room like the turning of a tide. She knew him well. He did not raise his voice, he did not show off, and he never tried to intimidate others, but his silence carried weight, and his confidence made people stand straighter. She imagined the moment he walked in, calm and collected, and the staff realizing everything they had assumed was wrong. That image strengthened her like armor. Then the unexpected happened. The arrogant manager returned, holding a brochure. He handed it to her with a sarcastic smile and said she could look at the pictures since it was free. His tone was sugar-sweet but sharp enough to cut. The woman met his eyes and held his gaze without blinking. For the first time, the manager shifted uncomfortably, as if he felt something he could not explain. Her calm silence unsettled him more than anger ever could. He cleared his throat and walked away quickly, trying to hide his sudden discomfort. The trainee saw the interaction and finally stepped forward. Ignoring the knot in his stomach, he approached her slowly and whispered an apology for the way she was being treated. He said he wished he could help, but the manager would punish him if he tried. The woman smiled gently and told him that kindness never goes unnoticed, even when others try to hide it. Her words soothed his heart, and he stood a little taller before walking away, feeling a spark of courage he had not felt when he arrived that morning. Then, through the dealership windows, a sleek luxury car pulled into the parking space near the entrance. Its engine purred softly, refined and powerful. A few employees noticed and straightened their suits instantly, expecting an influential client. The simple woman felt her heartbeat quicken, not out of fear, but out of quiet satisfaction. She knew the moment had arrived. The staff did not yet realize it, but the world inside that dealership was about to shift. Every assumption, every insult, every judgment was about to come crashing down, and the reveal would be unforgettable. The sleek luxury car outside caught the attention of nearly every staff member. The engine sound alone hinted at power and wealth, and the polished body reflected the sunlight like a mirror. The manager straightened his tie, the salesman fixed their posture, and even the receptionist sat up taller. They prepared themselves to greet what they assumed would be a valuable client, none of them realizing that the car belonged to the husband of the simple woman they had been mistreating. The simple woman kept her eyes on the door, her heartbeat steady, knowing everything was about to change. The door opened slowly and a tall man stepped inside. He wore a clean but simple suit, elegant without being loud. His watch was subtle yet unmistakably expensive. His shoes shined without flashy decoration. His presence alone commanded attention, not because he tried, but because confidence wrapped around him like an invisible cloak. The staff glanced at each other, instantly alert and eager. Believing this man to be a high-profile buyer, the manager rushed forward with a wide smile, his voice suddenly sweet and polished as he welcomed the new arrival. But the man did not look at the manager. His eyes searched the room until they landed on the simple woman standing beside the car. The moment he saw her, his expression softened, a warm smile forming as he walked toward her with calm certainty. The staff froze, confusion spreading through their faces like a slow shock. The man reached her and touched her hand gently, asking if she had been waiting long. She shook her head with a small smile, but her eyes told the story he could read instantly. He turned his head slowly toward the room, and his calm demeanor shifted into something colder, sharper, controlled yet powerful. The manager blinked rapidly, trying to understand what he was seeing. He cleared his throat and asked if the man needed assistance, expecting him to ignore the simple woman and begin looking at cars. Instead, the man asked a single question in a low, controlled voice. He asked who had refused to help his wife. The word wife echoed through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The staff stared, stunned, their fake confidence melting away into fear and embarrassment. The salesman who had laughed earlier stepped back, their faces draining of color. The trainee watched, eyes wide, feeling justice building like a rising tide. The manager stuttered, saying there must have been a misunderstanding. He claimed they were just busy, that they meant no disrespect, that they were going to assist her soon, but the man did not look convinced. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out a sleek black card, glossy and unmistakable, the kind of card reserved only for the highest level of wealth, the kind of card that could buy anything in the room without question. He placed it calmly on the counter in front of the manager. The sound it made against the surface was soft, yet it felt louder than thunder to everyone watching. The dealership went silent, not a whisper, not a breath, even customers stood still, watching the scene unfold like a movie. The man looked at the manager and said that a place that judged people by appearance did not deserve his business. His voice was calm, but the words carried weight like iron. The manager swallowed hard, sweat forming at his hairline. He tried to apologize, his voice shaking as he insisted they could fix the situation, that they could offer premium service, VIP attention, special discounts, anything he wanted. But the man shook his head slowly, telling him that respect should be given before money is revealed, not after. The simple woman stood beside him, her posture relaxed now, knowing the power of truth was speaking without anger. The trainee stepped forward nervously and admitted in front of everyone that the woman had been treated unfairly. The man looked at the young employee and nodded with approval, saying that he respected honesty and courage. The trainee's shoulders lifted with pride even as the other staff glared at him silently. The couple turned toward the door, and the man wrapped an arm gently around his wife, guiding her out with quiet dignity. The entire dealership watched them leave, regret settling over the room like heavy fog. They had just lost not only a sale, but their reputation in the eyes of everyone present. As whispers began spreading among the customers about what had happened, the staff stood frozen, their arrogance shattered and scattered like broken glass on the showroom floor. Outside, the air felt fresh and open. The man opened the car door for his wife with loving care. She smiled at him, grateful not for the wealth, but for the respect he showed her always. They drove away calmly, leaving behind a dealership full of people who had learned a lesson they would never forget. And the story was far from over, because the next place they visited would reveal an even deeper contrast, showing what true respect really looked like. The road felt peaceful as the couple drove away from the dealership that had treated the simple woman so poorly. The man kept one hand on the wheel and one hand holding hers gently, silently telling her that she was valued, respected, and loved. She looked out the window, letting the humiliation fade like dust in the wind. She breathed deeper now, feeling lighter, knowing that she had not needed to shout or defend herself. The truth had revealed itself, and dignity had won without a single raised voice. Still, there was a small ache inside her, not for herself, but for the world that judged people by clothes instead of character. The car turned into another dealership, one smaller and less flashy but welcoming in appearance. The building did not shine like glass, yet it felt warmer, softer, more human. As soon as they stepped through the door, a salesperson approached with a genuine smile, not forced, not calculated. He greeted them politely and asked how he could help. His eyes did not look at clothing, jewelry, or shoes. His attention focused on their faces, their expressions, their comfort. The simple woman already felt the difference, and her shoulders relaxed. The salesperson listened carefully as the woman explained the kind of car her husband loved. The man stood beside her quietly, letting her speak, proud of the confidence returning to her voice. The salesperson nodded and said he would be happy to show them options. He walked at their pace, not rushing, not leading aggressively. He opened a car door for them and encouraged them to sit inside. The simple woman watched him closely, amazed by how kindness could feel like sunlight after a storm. The man observed too, his eyes thoughtful, knowing he would reward this respectful treatment. Meanwhile, back at the first dealership, the staff stood in uneasy silence. The manager paced restlessly, fearing the consequences of what happened. The salesman whispered nervously, realizing customers had witnessed everything. The trainee sat quietly, conflicted but proud that he had spoken the truth. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with regret, but none of them could undo what had already taken place. The simple woman and her husband were gone, and so was the opportunity they had thrown away. Back at the new dealership, the couple explored more cars. The salesperson offered them water and asked respectful questions. Never assuming, never judging, he treated the simple woman as if she were the most important customer in the world. He listened to her thoughts, her preferences, her ideas. The man watched his wife smile, a real smile this time, soft and glowing. He felt joy rising inside him, not because they were about to buy a car, but because someone finally treated her the way she always deserved to be treated. The salesperson asked if they would like to test drive a vehicle, and the couple agreed. The simple woman sat behind the wheel first, her hands steady, her posture proud. The man sat beside her, admiring how she looked more confident with each passing minute. They drove through quiet streets, the engine smooth, the moment peaceful. When they returned, the salesperson thanked them sincerely and asked if they had enjoyed the experience. The woman nodded happily, saying it felt perfect, and the Man agreed with a calm certainty that carried weight. Then came the moment that changed everything for the second dealership. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out the same black card he had placed on the counter earlier. This time, he handed it to the salesperson with warmth instead of coldness. The salesperson blinked in surprise, realizing who he was serving, but his expression did not change into greed or shock. Instead, he simply smiled and said he appreciated their trust. The simple woman felt tears touch her eyes softly, not from sadness, but from relief, from validation, from the simple power of respect. Together, they signed documents and completed the purchase smoothly. The man insisted the car be registered in his wife's name, surprising her. The salesperson congratulated her sincerely, and she felt her heart swell with pride. Outside, the sun glowed gently as the couple stood beside the new car. The man looked at her with affection and said she deserved the best, not because of money, but because of who she was. She leaned into him with a soft laugh, feeling seen and cherished. As they prepared to leave, the manager of the second dealership came to thank them personally. He did not flatter, he did not exaggerate, he simply expressed gratitude for their visit. The simple woman and her husband drove away in their new car, feeling joy instead of discomfort, pride instead of pain, dignity instead of judgment, and though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew the first dealership would remember this day for a very long time, because respect had chosen its side, and it was not theirs. News travels fast in small places, and even faster in places filled with pride. At the first dealership, whispers spread like wildfire. A customer who witnessed the scene posted about it online, describing how a simple woman was ignored and mocked, only for her billionaire husband to arrive and reveal the truth. Within minutes, other customers began sharing similar stories of being judged by appearance. The staff felt the pressure building, each notification on their phones tightening their chest a little more. The manager tried to maintain control, but fear slipped through his confident mask like cracks in stone. Meanwhile, the simple woman and her husband drove peacefully toward home in their new car. The engine hummed like a soft melody, and the sunlight danced gently across the dashboard. The woman ran her hand along the seat, feeling the smooth leather beneath her fingers. For the first time that day, she felt fully relaxed, fully respected, and fully appreciated. Her husband glanced at her and smiled. Knowing she had endured more than she ever should have, he admired her strength, her patience, and her grace, qualities richer than any wealth he possessed. Back at the first dealership, the trainee sat alone during his break, thinking about what had happened. He replayed the moments in his mind, the way the woman stood strong despite mistreatment, the way her husband's calm presence changed everything. He wondered what kind of love created that kind of respect. He wondered how people could fail to see value beyond clothing and jewelry. The trainee made a quiet promise to himself that he would never judge a customer by appearance again. His heart felt lighter after making that decision, as if he had chosen the person he wanted to become. The manager, however, was not thinking about kindness, he was thinking about consequences. He feared a complaint reaching corporate offices, fears that his reputation would crumble, fears that his authority would be questioned. He had built his position on status, intimidation, and image, and now it was slipping through his fingers like sand. He gathered the staff and tried to lecture them, pretending that he had always encouraged fair treatment. The salesmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. Knowing his words were empty, knowing they had followed his lead, not their own judgment. At home, the simple woman brewed tea while her husband watched her with quiet admiration. She asked if he was angry about what happened. He shook his head gently and said anger was too small a reaction for such a small place. He told her that the world was full of people who saw only surfaces, but that she had always seen deeper. He reminded her of the countless times she helped strangers, comforted friends, and treated everyone with dignity. The woman blushed softly, humbled by his praise. She told him she did not need to be defended, but she appreciated that he stood by her. The love between them filled the room like warmth from a fireplace. Later that evening, their doorbell rang, and the woman opened it to find a bouquet of flowers. There was a card attached, written in careful handwriting. It was from the trainee at the first dealership, apologizing again and thanking her for showing grace when others showed disrespect. He wrote that her calm strength inspired him to be better. The woman smiled gently, touched by the gesture. Her husband read the note and nodded approvingly, saying that even painful moments can plant seeds of change in the right hearts. Across the city, the first dealership grew quieter as fewer customers walked through the doors. The online post continued spreading, gaining comments from people who believed respect should be universal. The manager read each word with growing dread, realizing his arrogance had become public knowledge. The staff avoided his eyes, knowing his downfall was of his own making. The trainee watched silently, knowing he would soon leave for a better workplace, where kindness was not punished and empathy was not weakness. In contrast, the second dealership saw a rise in customers. People came because they heard there was a place where everyone was treated with dignity. The salesperson who helped the couple felt proud. Even though he did not know the full story behind the rise in business, he continued serving customers the same way he always had, with sincerity, patience, and warmth. The simple woman and her husband quietly became part of a change they never announced. Their experience became a lesson not spoken, but felt. As night settled, the couple sat together in their living room, sipping tea. The woman leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, grateful for the day's ending. He wrapped his arm around her and whispered that true wealth was not in money or possessions, but in how you treat others and how you are treated by those who love you. The woman closed her eyes, letting the truth of those words settle gently into her heart. And while the world outside continued to judge, assume, and measure worth the wrong way, inside their home, respect and love remained richer than any black card could ever show. Days passed, and the story continued to spread far beyond what anyone expected. More people came forward with their own experiences of being judged because of their clothing, their age, or their quiet appearance. The first dealership became a symbol of arrogance, while the simple woman became a symbol of dignity. Even though she never asked for attention, she lived her life quietly, unaware that strangers were speaking about her strength, unaware that her silence had taught a louder lesson than anger ever could. Her husband noticed the growing discussions online and smiled softly, knowing the truth had a way of traveling on its own. One morning, the simple woman and her husband were invited to a charity event. It was hosted by a group that supported respect, equality, and kindness in business. The couple attended without fanfare. Arriving in the car they purchased from the second dealership, people approached them warmly, treating them with politeness and admiration, not because of wealth, but because of the message their story represented. The woman felt humbled, surprised that her experience had reached so many hearts. She never imagined that her quiet moment of humiliation would turn into a reminder for others to treat people better. At the same time, the first dealership faced consequences far stronger than the manager feared. A regional supervisor arrived unannounced to investigate the complaints. Customers had stopped visiting, reviews plummeted, and the staff felt the weight of their choices pressing down on them. The manager tried to explain, blaming confusion, blaming the woman, blaming anything except his own behavior, but the supervisor listened to employees separately, and the trainee told the truth with calm honesty, explaining how the woman was mocked and dismissed, explaining how kindness was discouraged. His words carried more power than he realized because they came from sincerity. Back at the charity event, the simple woman was asked to speak. She hesitated, shy and unsure, but her husband squeezed her hand gently, telling her she had nothing to fear. She stepped forward slowly, her voice soft but steady. She spoke about how she once believed that everyone deserved respect, no matter what they wore or how they looked. She shared how painful it felt to be treated as if she did not matter, not because she was poor, but because she was judged without anyone knowing her. She said no one should have to prove their worth to be treated with dignity. The room fell silent, moved by her sincerity. Her words flowed like calm water, touching everyone present. Meanwhile, the supervisor at the dealership made a decision. The manager was removed from his position, his arrogance finally costing him what he valued most. The salesman who mocked the woman received formal warnings, and training was enforced to teach respect and equality. The trainee was offered a promotion and the opportunity to help create a better environment. He accepted, determined to build a workplace where no customer would feel invisible. The atmosphere in the dealership shifted, humility settling where pride once stood. When the simple woman and her husband returned home from the event, they found a letter waiting in their mailbox. It was from the new acting manager of the first dealership, apologizing sincerely and informing them of the changes made. The letter asked if they would ever consider visiting again, not to buy, but to see how different things had become. The woman read the letter slowly and smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. She did not need revenge, she did not need them to bow or beg. Knowing change had happened was enough for her heart. Her husband asked if she wanted to return someday, even just to look. She shook her head gently and said some doors, once closed, should stay closed, not out of bitterness, but out of growth. The man kissed her forehead and agreed, understanding her without needing further explanation. They sat together on the couch, watching the evening light dance across the room, feeling grateful for the life they shared and the lessons learned without shouting or hatred. The world outside continued moving fast, but inside their home everything felt calm, balanced, and warm. The simple woman realized that true power was not in money or black cards or luxury cars. True power was in self-worth, in grace, in the ability to stay gentle in a world that often forgets kindness. Her husband looked at her with admiration, knowing that she, without trying, had taught everyone a lesson. And somewhere in the city, people who had never met her repeated her story, not as gossip, but as a reminder that respect should never be optional. The days that followed felt gentle and peaceful for the simple woman. She returned to her everyday routines, watering her plants, reading on the porch, and baking bread that filled the house with warmth. The humiliation she once felt no longer weighed on her. Instead, it became a memory that carried a powerful lesson, not just for her, but for everyone who heard the story. Her husband watched her with admiration, knowing that she had turned a moment of disrespect into a quiet victory, a victory earned without shouting, anger, or revenge, but through dignity, patience, and truth. The new car sat in their driveway, shining in the sunlight, yet the woman did not see it as a symbol of status or wealth. She saw it as a symbol of being valued. She saw it as proof that respect should never be tied to appearance. She saw it as a reminder that even the quietest voice could change hearts. The neighbors admired the car, but they admired her more. They noticed her kindness, her humility, and her gentle nature, qualities that left a stronger impression than any expensive purchase ever could. One afternoon, while the woman was tending to her garden, the trainee from the first dealership arrived unexpectedly. He stood at the edge of the yard, holding a small envelope and looking nervous but hopeful. The woman greeted him kindly and invited him to sit. He explained that he had been promoted and that the dealership was changing its policies. He said they were now training employees to treat all customers with respect, regardless of appearance, background, or clothing. He thanked her again, saying her calm strength had opened his eyes and inspired him to be better. The woman listened quietly, touched by his sincerity. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note signed by the staff he once worked beside. Some apologized, some admitted they had been wrong, some confessed they had learned something important from the situation. The woman read each line slowly, not with pride, but with compassion. She told the trainee she forgave them and wished them growth. The trainee left with relief in his heart, knowing he had done the right thing. The woman returned to her garden, feeling the sunlight warm. Her face, knowing the world in a small but meaningful way, had changed for the better. Meanwhile, at the second dealership, business continued to grow. Customers told others about the respectful service, the kindness, the sincerity they experienced there. The salesperson who had helped the couple became known for treating people like people rather than price tags. The owner of the dealership noticed the rise in success and praised the team for building trust rather than assumptions. The simple woman and her husband never took credit. They did not seek recognition, applause, or attention. They simply lived their lives with quiet grace, knowing their actions had planted seeds of change. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the husband and wife sat together on their porch, sipping tea. The air was calm, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. The woman leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her gently. He told her that the world often forgot what true value looked like, but she had reminded them, not with wealth, but with character. She smiled softly, saying she did not do anything grand, but he shook his head and said sometimes. The smallest actions changed the biggest minds. The woman closed her eyes, letting his words settle in her heart like a warm blanket. They sat there for a long time, watching the sky shift from gold to pink to deep blue. The world around them continued moving, people rushing, judging, assuming, measuring worth in shallow ways, but in their little space, everything felt peaceful, balanced, and honest. The woman realized that true wealth was not about money, cards, or cars. True wealth was love, respect, kindness, and the ability to stay gentle in a world that can be harsh. She felt grateful, not for the car or the black card, but for the reminder that character still mattered and that dignity still had power. As night settled, the stars appeared, sparkling quietly above them. The husband kissed her forehead and whispered that she was the richest woman he had ever known, not because of money but because of heart. The woman smiled, her eyes shining softly. She held his hand and whispered back that he was the only treasure she ever needed. And somewhere, far beyond their home, people continued sharing the story, passing it from voice to voice, not as gossip, but as a reminder, a lesson, a truth, that respect should be given freely, that worth is not worn on the outside, and that the simplest person may carry the richest soul.